it's no surprise that where there's good connection and good engagement, it's correlated really highly with a positive outcome. Police now are going into these houses, and the first question will be, what do you want us to do? What will be helpful? Which is a huge shift from police going in and taking control, which, you know, is always what they've been taught to do. But for them to go in now and ask families, what would you like? How can we help? Has been a huge shift, and it's really, really encouraging. Because that was probably one of my biggest reservations. I was trying to imagine myself sitting in a house with gang members asking them the miracle question and wondering how much I get laughed at. But people have amazing answers. And I mean, thus far, I've found the answers to be very realistic, very achievable, and for the most part, they're already on the way to achieving those things. Despite my early misgivings, I found that solution-focused approach works with even the most difficult cases, and sometimes that's the cases where it's most successful. So that's been a really good thing to try and promote here, that solution-focused is not just for the easy stuff, it's for the really hard stuff too. So when I started the job, I had never heard of solution focused. I was trained in cognitive and behavioural psychology and thought that was amazing. So I'd probably been in the job a year and before I had even heard of solution focused. And so my introduction to it was a one-day training by Michael Durant in Napier. And I actually can't even remember why I went to it, but obviously there was something that appealed to me. And I remember distinctly sitting in the training and having very, very mixed thoughts and mixed views. Part of me was absolutely in love with it from day one, and I thought, this is amazing, it's so simple, and immediately started thinking about families I had worked with in the past that I wished I knew this approach back then, because I think I would have done a much more justice and done a better job with them. So part of me was really enthusiastic, and the other part of me thought, well, this is really sounds good, but I can't really see it working with the types of families and young people that I see. So I was sort of sat there and argued with myself for that day. Then I thought, well, the only way I'm going to know is to just try it. Just go back, try it out with some of the families and see how it goes. And so I did that and have never really looked back. For me, it's been amazing. It's kind of covers all the things that are important to me about working with people, and that it's respectful. It's really puts the families and the young people in charge. It's not about being an expert, and I was never comfortable with the expert model. I never enjoyed the pressure, I guess, of having to be the one that had the answers, or any kind of hierarchical kind of approach where was considered to be kind of beneath the expert. So this approach took away a lot of the stuff that I really didn't enjoy about my job, and gave me just a huge new enthusiasm for work, and for life. And a couple of people have already mentioned that they use it in their life, and I think I can completely relate to that. It just becomes part of who you are, and to me it's impossible to kind of keep solution focused as something that I do from 9 till 5, and not have it just permeate my whole life. My kids get a bit annoyed at times when I start the solution focused conversations, but they know that it's really helpful as well, and I've actually heard them do it themselves. Okay, so I'm just going to talk about the approach that I use. I don't think I'll be able to teach anyone anything new, because I still, even after 7 years, still see myself as very much a newbie with much to learn from lots of people. So when I started the job in 2010, as I said, I hadn't heard of solution focused, and so I walked into it with these were the outcomes that we were supposed to achieve with young people. So the role is around working with children up to the age of 14. with the goal of moving them onto a better pathway and not moving into youth court or prison as adults. So the outcomes that they were looking for were um, reduction in the risk factors. The YORST is a measure that the police use. Um, I won't go into it, but suffice to say, it's really quite meaningless. It looks at things like the demographic of the area that the person lives in. It doesn't measure anything that's really amenable to change. Um, so they wanted us to do referrals to support services. Again, yeah, we could do those, but that doesn't necessarily reflect any positive outcomes. Um, Alternative action plans are something that police have been very big on. So they include things like young people writing letters of apology or doing community service or having a curfew or being on a good behaviour bond. So the thinking used to be very much that if they could tick all those boxes, then that meant that the young person would turn their life around somehow. And yeah, things like this. So reparation to victims and completing community work. So initially I thought that made sense, but after I learned solution focused, I realized this is really not meaningful to families, and it's certainly not meaningful to the young people, and it certainly didn't result in people moving off that offending pathway. So I began to think to myself around there must be a better way of working with people. Are these outcomes meaningful to the young people? And they weren't. Do the young people actually want something different? And should we actually be asking them what a better future looks like in their opinion? And so solution focused was a fantastic way of doing that, as you all know, because it's completely around what the young person wants, and using things like the miracle question and their preferred futures and the scaling. It was just an absolutely fabulous way, particularly with children who had so much to say about how they wanted life to be. And I'll talk a bit more later on about how creative kids are to work with and how they never cease to amaze me with the things they come up with and the ideas they have and the strategies that they use. Um, so kind of touched on these things here. And this has been the last point here about seeing offenders as fellow human beings and not labeling them as offenders. That's been a really big part of my role within police. I think police, can understandably to some point see families and children at their very worst moments. And so I'm lucky I get to see these young people in their good moments when things are going well for them. I get to see them talking about the things they enjoy, the things that they're good at. And so police form quite a jaded view, I think, of families. And a big part of my role has been even just being able to go back to the office and talk to them about how well kids are doing and how well families are doing. And one example quite recently was there's a young boy I'm working with who I'll talk about it a bit later, who um, would have some very, very difficult moments. And one big thing for him was afterwards he would carry a lot of guilt and shame and a desire to put things right with the people who he had upset. And one of the police officers who attended an incident with him talked to me afterwards about it and ended up doing a home visit to see this young boy a week or so later, which was absolutely fantastic for both of them. The police officer got to see this young boy for his true self, who he really was, and what a great kid he is. And the young boy, it was just fabulous for him. It was really healing for him. And that police officer has gone on to continue to catch up with him every month or so just to show interest in him. And it's been absolutely fantastic for both of them, really. So what it involves in terms of working with offenders or young offenders, if you like, is really no different to anything else. The young people I worked with, there was no compulsion for them to engage. They didn't have to accept the service. Their parents needed to give consent, parent or caregiver, but pretty much all of the young people and families who I worked with hadn't sought the help themselves. They'd been referred either by police or sometimes by outside agencies like mental health or our child protection services, or a lot referred by schools and social workers in schools who often identified these young people before they'd even come to police notice, which was great because it gives that even earlier opportunity to work with them. So are there major differences? I haven't found there to be. In fact, if anything, I've found that they're more easily engaged than sometimes my experience of people who come voluntarily. They've certainly been very able to identify their goals and describe a preferred future. Um, and often, I mean, I can't remember the last time I ever talked to a young person or a family about offending. It never comes up. Obviously, the children and the families know why I'm there. They know I work for the police, but they very quickly discover that I'm not there to tell them off. I'm not there to um, wave my finger at them or get them into trouble. I'm there to find out their strengths, what they enjoy, and how they want life to be. And invariably, that leads us completely away from a discussion around offending or the hard stuff. So definitely, preferred future is huge. Exceptions are extremely big part of the work with young people. Talking to kids about the times when someone's annoyed them at school, but they've managed to keep their cool or use a good strategy or be successful in a situation where in the past maybe they'd found really difficult. And kids love scaling. And it's a lovely way, I think, to help kids, particularly the older kids that I work with, move away from a really black and white thinking style of everything's great or everything's terrible. So helping kids to sort of see that middle ground and to measure the progress that they're making and really realise what an awesome job they're doing. And how well they're managing sometimes some really big problems. Some of these kids come from very, very difficult backgrounds where there's abuse and neglect and violence and drugs. We've got a huge violence rates in Hawke's Bay, a huge issue with methamphetamine. And so some of these kids come from extremely difficult homes, yet their resilience and their ability to make progress and be positive and even imagine a future is just brings you to tears at times. It's incredible. They're amazing young people. So the framework is I pretty much use a modified signs of safety framework, which Andrew Tennell was more than happy for me to use as long as I credited him with it. And I found it works really, really well. There's probably 20 people in New Zealand working in the child case manager position. So all around New Zealand, there's people working with children who are offending, and probably 7 of them have, that was at last count, had adopted the solution-focused approach. And they've just found that families really enjoy it and respond well to it, because often it's the first time they've been asked what they think about anything, or invited to share their own goals or dreams or hopes for their children. And so the other people who are using it are enjoying using it, and I think they're experiencing the similar increase in job satisfaction and just enjoyment of the work that I did when I began using solution focused. So that's really awesome to hear other people enjoying the benefits of it as well. So this is pretty self-explanatory, talking about the things that we're worried about. Obviously, while we focus on the positives and the preferred future, often there are some significant risks or worries around children or around stuff at home that we do need to talk about and work out safety plans for, or work out how we're going to manage it. So the next thing we talk about is the quality of the engagement, and it's no surprise that where there's good connection and good engagement, it's correlated really highly with a positive outcome. I think I'm very lucky in my role because police give me a lot of flexibility, so I'm allowed to take as long as it needs to form a good trusting relationship with a child, and sometimes that takes significant time for a child to get to know me and to trust me, and often that involves a lot of conversations around all sorts of things like lollies and TV programs and movies and anything that the child's interested in, before I will even begin to sort of try and do some more therapeutic, if you like, work with them. So from here, we just go on to talk about anything that we're unclear about, talking about what the family want to see in their lives, what the child wants to see in their lives, and where there's other agencies involved, particularly child protection. We also talk about what that agency might need to see in order for them to close their case or leave the family alone, as they often put it. So from everyone's viewpoint, we kind of crystallize that into an overall plan, which is reviewed at least every 6 weeks. And updated on our police system so that at any time police management know what's happening with the child. And that also will include if there's anything particular that frontline police need to know if they are attending an incident, what works for the child or what works for the family, and how to approach them, how to deal with them. And most of it comes down to common sense stuff around being respectful and just treating them like people, and not going in aggressively and kind of the old way that police used to approach things. So that's been really good, and I've had lots of great feedback where police now are going into these houses, and the first question will be, what do you want us to do? What will be helpful? Which is a huge shift from police going in and taking control, which, you know, is always what they've been taught to do. But for them to go in now and ask families, what would you like? How can we help? Has been a huge shift, and it's really, really encouraging. And families are really appreciative of that change in approach. So not every child is a chatterbox. Not all children talk openly about stuff, particularly if there's things going on at home which are they're considered things that you don't talk about with strangers or outside people. Some children are extremely private, and even when you get to know them well, they're less talkative or less open than others, and that's fine. And there's often very private stuff that they don't want to share with you. And so a big thing I've learned is, and I think it was in a training, one of Michael's trainings, I learned around that you don't need to know about the problem in order to help them find a solution to it. Excuse me. And I remember a young boy I worked with years ago who talked about intrusive thoughts that he was having, that he was finding quite distressing, but really didn't want to elaborate on what they were. And so we had lots of conversations around the fact that I didn't need to know what the thoughts were, but as long as we could talk about how they affected him and times when he could manage them better, that was okay. I didn't need to know the content of those thoughts. And as long as he was safe, so making sure that he was safe and they weren't, the nature of the thoughts weren't of any risk to him or anyone else, I didn't even need to know. And to this day, I don't know what they were that was troubling him, but he's doing fantastically now. I only ended up working with him for maybe 2 months, and he's probably 17 now and just about finishing school and looking to go on and do an apprenticeship, and very happy, and things going really, really well for him. So that was a big benefit of solution focus to me, just the fact that I don't need to know the details of what people are struggling with in order to be able to help them, which has been great because a lot of kids don't want to talk. So some challenges with the work. One would definitely be moving too quickly for the family, and I think I've read some articles in recent times on solution focused versus solution forced. And it's certainly something that's always in my mind, I think, to not move too quickly for the family and to really acknowledge sometimes really difficult, hard situations that people are in. I know from personal experience, a few years ago, going through a really, really difficult time in my life, and a good friend of mine who is also a solution focused practitioner, and I think we learnt the approach about the same time. And his first question to me was, um, solution forced, to say the least, and he did not get a good response. So I've been on the receiving end of someone wanting to move me too quickly, and so I'm very mindful of not doing that to families or young people. Um, I'm lucky that I have time. So as I mentioned, I don't have a time frame. Working for police is really amazing because they don't prescribe how I work with people. They don't prescribe how long I work with people. They trust me to do what's needed and the time that is required to do that. So I'm very fortunate that I have the luxury of time to work with people. So often there's multiple clients. They might be referred by police, and police, for example, our child protection team might have in their mind a desired outcome, which may be quite at odds with what the family or the young person wants. And so sometimes it's a juggling act and trying to balance everybody's needs and wishes. But police are very clear that I'm employed by them, but I'm there for the families and they come first. And so if there's ever a toss up between what the family want and what the police want within reason, um, generally I can work it in such a way that the police realise that there's actually other ways to move things forward rather than um, prosecutions or things like that. They've become a lot more open to alternative resolutions to things, which has been really positive as well. And I guess that really covers a disagreement over the goals as well with those kind of situations. So a little boy I want to talk about quickly, I call him the little professor. He's a little boy I met in May this year. So he was referred, there was an incident one evening, which I found out about the next day when I went to work. And so this young boy had for some reason become very distressed at home, and his response was to go and climb on the roof at their place, and they live in a two-story house, so he was relatively high off the ground. And police at the time took quite a heavy-handed approach. They ended up, he had locked himself in the bathroom, and I think they knocked the door down. He fled onto the roof, and so there was a really excessive police response where he was dragged in off the roof of the house. So I picked that case up the next day and made contact with his nana. He lives with his grandmother and has lived with her since he was a baby, and talked to her in the first instance about how things were for him and what would be helpful. So Nana said to me that he was a very shy child. He at the time was, she said he won't ever talk to you. Lots of people have tried to get alongside him and work with him, but he just won't engage at all. At the same time, he was being assessed by our child development service, and they were looking at whether he fell on the autistic spectrum or what could be wrong with him. So he had just fairly recently started along that pathway when this incident happened with the police, where I became involved with him. So when I first met him, I walked into the house and he immediately hid behind the couch. I talked to his nana for a little bit, and then he'd gone upstairs, and he came downstairs with a suitcase and asked me if he could show me what was inside the suitcase. So what he had set up in his little suitcase was like a homemade, like a pinball. I'm not sure if everyone knows what they are, but like a pinball machine set up. And he went through a really detailed description of what this meant to him. And he put the ball at the top, and he talked about the ball representing his um, anger and his anxiety. And when the ball rolled down, he talked about every level it hit was an opportunity for him to use a strategy or make a choice that could either stop the ball going further down, or if he made the wrong choice, in his view, things would end up going really badly and the ball would hit the ground and things like the night before would happen where police were called. So he he not only talked, he almost didn't stop talking. I think I was there for 2.5 hours. He talked the whole time. Very socially competent, lovely, lovely kid, hugely intelligent, just not really into people. He's good social skills, but for him, his ideal life would be having a little bit to do with people, but mostly with his nana and mostly working on his inventions and his robots that he built and making stuff and taking things apart. So he certainly, to my first impression of him, there was no way he fell on the autistic spectrum. Um, when I left, he gave me a really big hug, and he said that before I came, that life was really grey and like the clouds outside, but when I left, there was lots of smiley faces in the air. And he later on came through the child development service assessment, and they rang his nana and said to her that he didn't quite fit any of the boxes, that they were trying to put a label on him, but they couldn't figure out which one. He didn't really quite tick any of the boxes, and so they were at a loss to figure out what was wrong with him. And when he heard that, he made the absolutely gorgeous comment of, I must be a special type of human that nobody has seen before. He's just adorable. And the strategies he comes up with are unbelievable. Honestly, could write a book just on the different creativity that he has. He talked the other day to me about the progress he's made, and he said that back in earlier in the year when he was I first met him, he said he was like a nuclear reactor, and now he says he's just like a small nuclear power plant where, as long as he opens the door every now and then to let some of the nuclear power out, he's fine. But most delightfully, he says that um, back in May, he used to go to bed every night and feel sad because feel bad about himself, feel like he'd made bad decisions, feel like he was a bad person, and feel really unhappy. But now he goes to bed at night and says, that was a really great day. I can't wait for tomorrow, which is just awesome. He's 10 now and he is doing fantastically. And yeah, super proud of him. He's done some amazing things. And police haven't been called to their house for probably 4 or 5 months. So he's certainly doing fabulously. Does it work? These are just some statistics that we looked at from 2010 to 2017. So, of all of the young people that I work with, which is probably 300 or 400 in that time, 89% of them haven't come to further police notice at all. About 9% had come to police notice for very minor incidents. So they were things like perhaps they were in town after school without an adult, so unaccompanied adults, or maybe a truancy incident, but certainly much less serious than what they were originally coming to notice for. And the 2% that have continued to pop up with more serious incidents are the ones, predictably, who are still in very, very toxic home environments where there's ongoing family harm, abuse and neglect, and we haven't had any ability, I guess, from our Child Protection Service to put them in a better environment. So they tend to be, and I think the same would be true now if I look back, the ones who I don't get good luck with, good success with, are the ones where I really am ineffective, largely because I'm working against a very, very, very bad environment. So while we do get some success, it's limited by the difficulties that are outside our control. And this is just a bit of feedback from some of the families over the years, which I'll just put up and let you read. Sorry for the bad language in that last one. That's just he's actually a gang member, that father, but he's done some amazing changes. And I think that the nice thing is that the families feel respected and they feel listened to, and they feel like, I think they recognise that their child, their grandchild, and them are the ones who have achieved it. So when things are better, they can own that and they can say that they did it. I didn't really do a lot. I talk to them, but the work is done by them. And that middle one with the 9-year-old, that's the little boy I've just spoken about just now. And this is one of my favourite comments that a little boy said. So I guess my closing thoughts are this, that people are people. I mean, I've worked in education, I've worked in mental health, and it doesn't matter where you come across people, they're people, and they have the same hopes and dreams. It doesn't matter what the presenting issue or problem is that they've come in for. It's about meeting them where they are and connecting with them and helping them identify what better looks like and helping them get there. Despite my early misgivings, I found that solution-focused approach works with even the most difficult cases, and sometimes that's the cases where it's most successful. So that's been a really good thing to try and promote here, that solution-focused is not just for the easy stuff, it's for the really hard stuff too. And now that I've moved into family harm, I think our family harm team are embracing it, and I think that's going to be, we're going to see some really good results using that in family harm. And yeah, helping families have a voice. And a big part of my job is advocacy and making sure that the child and the family are heard and they're not drowned out by professionals dictating what they do. And I think this approach makes sure that that voice is at the forefront of what the work that is done with them. And it's also helped families see police in a different light. Often the families I go into have quite a negative view of police. Even the young children in the family often are very anti-police. And I think because I work for police and because I'm often able to bring other police staff into interventions, whether it's a frontline person doing a follow-up visit or whether it's a dog handler going and taking the dog around, it's helped form better relationships between some families who've been, have had generations of difficulty with police and vice versa. So it's helped build some bridges, which has been really, really nice. And this is just one of my favourite sayings. And for me, it really sums up the work that I was doing with children and young people.
Wonderful, Emma.
That's all I have to say.
I think you'll have more to say. Thank you very much. So what I'd like to do is open it up to any of you to ask questions. And so what questions do you have of Emma and her wonderful case study of the work she's doing, or work she previously did, moving on to more wonderful work she's doing. But what questions do you have?
So you said before you don't need to know the content.
Yeah.
Okay, but it's important, yeah. So it's important to know the context, but not the content. Is that it?
Yeah, I think so. And for me, I always used to wonder how much of my job was important information and how much of it was just actually being nosy around wanting to know the full story. And so part of it's being a learning process of actually, I don't need to know any more than they tell me. What I do need to know is about the exceptions. I don't need to know about the difficulties, although I want to know enough to really to be able to convey some understanding and some empathy. So I want to get a sense, I guess, of around that coping stuff, because some families go through some incredibly difficult times, and just the opportunity to say to them, you know, you're doing amazingly, and how have you managed?
Yeah.
What are
What
three
three lessons do you think a leader in a business organisation could learn from your work with youth and families?
I think that everyone's got something to offer, and I think um, people have amazing hidden talents and creative solutions that you would never know if you didn't inquire about them. If you had made the assumption that they don't really have any skills or strategies and imposed your own ideas on them. I mean, like I said, I could write a book on the incredible strategies that kids come up with. They're far more creative than I could ever in a million years come up with, and because they work for them and they suit them. So I think what you know, finding out what people already know and what's already working before you go in with any suggestions, and that's an obvious thing, I think, in solution focused. Probably that everyone in the family has value, and even sometimes it's been even the younger siblings of a child who've got some really good ideas, but often they're not asked. So typically services will talk to the problem child and the parents, but sometimes siblings have got really great ideas, or they will notice things, or they'll be really great supports, so that everyone's voice is important, not just the people who talk the most or generally are the ones who make themselves heard.
Mm.
Hmm. And I think I don't know if this is really a lesson, but um, keeping your eyes on where you want to be, and keeping that preferred future or those dreams or those goals alive. And when you've got more than one person, when one person loses hope, that the family or the support people can carry that hope for them and remind them of their successes, and remind them that, I mean, a family is a team too, I guess, just like a business can be a team if it's run well. And yeah, those shared preferred futures that everyone buys into, even though everyone has probably got slight variants of what that might look like.
And Chi Seng says, I'm really impressed that Emma brings out the best in others in all her interactions, not limited to just the cases assigned, that's youth and family, but also with her co-workers, infusing SF into a day-to-day interaction with others in very inspiring, as if she is breathing SF and living SF in every possible moment. And I think that's probably a lovely place to wrap up our conversation tonight. A really big thank you to you, Emma. I know it's a bit later for you in New Zealand. And thank you for Alan for not falling asleep during this session. And thank you for everyone. I think it's been a really lovely conversation tonight. And big thank you to all. I've recorded this, so I'm going to send it to John to put up on the SFiO website for everyone to access. And I can supply Emma's slides if people are interested in that. I could send those through as well. So thank you, everyone. Kath said, Emma, you are being commended for being the change you want to see. It's your way of being, not just what you do, that makes a difference. So big thanks to you, Emma, and everyone for being on the call.